Hello and welcome to my channel. The preserved tracks of dinosaurs are like windows into the past, revealing details about their behavior, biology, and environment that we just can't get from the fossil record. And some tracks are so well preserved they even retain the texture of the dino's skin. But what does this tell us about how these giants moved around? This is a reconstruction of a sauropod from the genus Patagotitan. We know it lived in Patagonia, which is where it gets the Titan part of its name, and that it was huge. But exactly how big? Well, we have an idea from its footprints. See, the size of a dinosaur's footprints can give us clues about the animal's size. In 2020, researchers in Argentina reported finding new tracks made by one of the largest dinosaurs that ever lived. The printmaker, probably a titanosaur, stepped on wet clay in what is now Patagonia during the late Cretaceous period around 96 million years ago. The dinosaur deposited a giant bipedal footprint that measured almost 1.5 meters long and wide. That's more than twice the length of my forearm. It would take me over 30% of those footprints to measure 1 meter. This new trackway had 4 footprints in a straight line, meaning the dinosaur was walking, not running. Plus, the space between each print shows that the dino was taking relatively small steps for something so massive. All of this suggests that the titanosaur was around 37 meters long, based on the formula developed by researchers that correlates footprint length with dinosaur length. If the dino had been any longer, the space between its prints would have been bigger. The titanosaur would have also needed to take bigger steps to keep from falling over. So this trackway really gives us insight into the way this dino walked, how much weight it was carrying, and even some hints at its preferred terrain. Like it looks like this one likes soft ground. And while this particular dino is a relatively recent find, we've been discovering dinosaur tracks all over the world for decades. In fact, some of the oldest dinosaur tracks come from the very first dinosaur. Well, maybe not technically the first, but close. In 2018, researchers described the discovery of footprints left by a member of the group that led to the evolution of all theropods. Theropods include Velociraptor, T-Rex, and yes, birds too. These animals were descendants of the first true dinosaurs, the archosaurs. The archosaurs split off from other early reptiles during the Triassic period and went on to dominate terrestrial ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. One group gave rise to today's crocodilians, while another led to the dinosaurs and eventually the birds. But before scientists could figure out which of these two lineages these footprints came from, they had to identify the tracks themselves. Dinosaur footprints can look like a lot of things. Sometimes they're shaped like bird tracks or fish tracks or even frog tracks. Early scientists didn't always know what to make of them and often attributed them to mythical beasts like dragons or giants. Some people still think dinosaurs didn't exist and that the tracks are proof of dragons. These particular tracks were found in a sandstone quarry near Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. They date back to around 228 million years ago and were made by an animal that was about the size of a house cat. The tracks don't look anything like what you might expect a small dino to leave behind, but then again, we didn't have any small dino fossils to compare them to either. It wasn't until later that scientists uncovered the skeleton of the Triassic meat-eater Coelophysis. Coelophysis was about 3 meters long, just like today's house cats. And when they compared the bones of its feet to the tracks, they saw that they matched up perfectly. Not only did they have the same shape, the bones also had the same number of toes. You don't see that in frogs, fish, or birds. And since crocodiles don't have toes at all, it looks like these tracks really belong to a very special kind of reptile. But the tracks aren't just helping scientists better understand individual species of dinosaurs. They're giving them insight into our planet's prehistoric environments too. Take these tracks, for instance. They were found in 2020 in Utah's Green River Formation, a site famous for preserving tiny aquatic animals and tar pits of prehistoric times. The tracks come from a long-necked sauropod. The location and preservation of the tracks suggests that the dino was wading in shallow water when it stepped into the tar pits and got stuck. The struggling dino left behind a series of tracks showing it thrashing around as it tried to free itself from the sticky situation. But unfortunately, no matter how hard the dino kicked its feet, it couldn't escape its fate. Its desperate attempts to free itself left a permanent record in the tar, and then scavengers picked clean its bones. Today, the tracks are the only trace of the dino's existence. They give us a glimpse of a sauropod behaving like a sauropod unlike any we've seen before. For example, we never see adult sauropods in the act of wading through water because they usually avoid it. There's nothing quite like this in the fossil record, which means we're relearning from the tar trap tracks that young sauropods may have behaved differently than their parents. Tar pits aren't the only type of prehistoric quicksand that has trapped dinosaurs, though. Sand is full of grains of different sizes, and if there's too much of the really fine stuff, it can turn into something called a debris flow, a thick slurry of mud and sand that rushes downhill with the consistency of wet concrete. The debris flow doesn't feel like regular quicksand, and it's hard to escape. In 2018, researchers in China reported the discovery of a series of tracks left by a herbivorous dino called Boreopelta which was related to Ankylosaurus. The dino was walking along when it suddenly found itself stuck in a debris flow. It tried to free itself by stomping its feet and even used its tail for support, but it struggled in vain. The tracks show that it was completely helpless against the current. Eventually, the water carried the dino away and it drowned. We don't see this kind of behavior in modern animals either, so it seems like ancient debris flows must have been pretty terrifying. In 2023, a new study came out detailing an unusual collection of dino footprints from Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. The tracks show groups of dinos moving in different directions, crossing paths and interacting with each other. This track site is exceptional because there are a lot of tracks all in one place, including tracks of several dinos, plus nests, and even eggs. It looks like the area may have been a kind of prehistoric crossroads where animals would congregate, kind of like watering holes do today. The researchers say it's the closest thing we have to direct evidence of dinosaur social behavior. Like we can actually see groups of dinosaurs interacting with each other here. Tracks like these are super helpful because they help us piece together dinosaur behavior and even their intelligence. So let's go back to those mysterious tracks with the texture of dino skin. What can they tell us? Well, when a dinosaur leaves a footprint, it deposits a little bit of skin with the print. Over time, the skin gets compressed and hardened alongside the rest of the fossil, turning into something called a dermatoglyph. Dermatoglyphs are basically fossilized fingerprints. In 2022, researchers analyzed a famous dinosaur from Canada called Wendyceratops. Wendy is a relative of Ankylosaurus and lived 110 million years ago. She died when she slipped and fell while wading in a lake. Her fossilized footprint includes her unique fingerprint pattern, and researchers used that pattern to identify her skeleton after it was discovered decades earlier. Now, thanks to Wendy's fingerprint, we know that dinosaurs had rough, scaly skin, not the smooth, leathery skin that we might expect from reptiles like snakes and lizards. Scientists are still working on figuring out exactly what dinosaurs looked like, but Wendy's fingerprint is helping them get closer to the truth. In fact, studying the skin texture preserved in dinosaur footprints may even help answer the question of whether or not dinosaurs were feathered. Birds are the only dinosaurs alive today, and they come in a whole lot of varieties, but feathers come in a whole lot fewer. While many dinosaurs are known to have had feathers, they tend to fall into one of only a few categories, either fully feathered like a bird, scaly with a few feathers here and there, or somewhere in between. But a recent study suggests that we may have been underestimating the diversity of feathers in dinosaurs. The team focused on the preservational gap, which refers to the lack of intermediate stages in the fossil record. To address this, they examined modern animals and built a model to predict the types of feathers that would degrade over time. Using this model, the team was able to estimate the diversity of feather types across major groups of dinosaurs and came up with a surprising result. It turns out dinosaurs probably had more kinds of feathers than we previously thought. So where do we go from here? Well, the next step is to find fossils to match the predictions made in the model. Hopefully it won't be too long before we get to see what other feathered friends once roamed the earth. Dinosaur footprints preserve a whole lot of information about the ancient world, but we're only beginning to unlock the secrets they hold. As we learn more about dinosaurs, we're also learning more about ourselves. After all, we are the ones telling these stories. And just like the dinosaurs whose footprints we study, we are perfectly adapted to our environment, especially when it comes to exploring the digital world.